This is a Ming vase. It's beautiful, it's priceless, and it's coming from China. Ming vases are very expensive. Steve Wynn, the casino owner, famous in Las Vegas and now Macau, bought one just a couple of years ago for about $10 million. That gives you an idea of the price tag for a Ming vase. And why do we call them Ming vase? Because they come from the Ming Dynasty in China. The Ming Dynasty was one of the most famous dynasties ever to rule China. And this dynasty was ruled actually from the mid-14th century to the mid-17th century. And the most famous emperor from the Ming Dynasty was named Zhu Di. He was famous, he was smart, he was ruthless, really ruthless. And he was the third emperor of the Ming Dynasty. So, why are we talking about Zhu Di? Because Zhu Di did many things. Zhu Di, for example, moved the capital that before him was in Nanjing to Beijing, that we know well now. He also created or commissioned the first real encyclopedia, biggest one in the world. Also, he created the Forbidden City in Beijing, and so on and so on. So he did many things, but today we are not talking about him because of all these accomplishments. There is another reason. The year is 1402. Let's remember that. 1402. What's the situation in China in 1402? 1402, Zhu Di has just taken the power, basically. And why? What happened? Well, it's family problems, as usual. What happened? The father of Zhu Di, follow me, is Hongwu. Hongwu was the first Ming emperor, so the Ming dynasty. Hongwu had many sons. Of course, he wanted his first son, Zhu Biao, to succeed him. And he said, "You will be my successor." "Yes, Dad, I'll follow your step." Unfortunately for Zhu Biao, he died very young. But he had time to father a son. He fathered a son named Jiang Wen. And so Hongwu, now the grandfather, said, "Jiang Wen, my grandson, you will be my successor." Zhu Di is the fourth son of Hongwu, and he's not very happy because he's in his 40s, and he sees this young 21-year-old, Jiang Wen, who's going to get the power, and this is what's happening. Because just after Hongwu dies, Jiang Wen take over the power. Zhu Di doesn't like that at all. So, how can he fight? Very simply. He did a blitzkrieg, let's call it blitzkrieg. With his troops, he rushed to Nanjing, remember, Nanjing, the capital at that time, and he kills, he fights, and everything, and he put the fire at the imperial palace. Supposedly, Jiang Wen dies in the fire. We are not sure. We never found, his body was never found. I was not there, of course. So on. Anyway, Zhu Di is the new emperor. Yeah, I am. And Zhu Di is happy, of course. But he doesn't want to relinquish quickly the power. So in order to keep the power, to strengthen his power, he kills and gets rid of all the supporters of Jiang Wen or former emperor, his father, Hongwu. So to clear the space so he can put his power. So he decides to move the capital to Beijing and also to do other things. But legitimacy is missing. What does this mean? It means that Zhu Di is not approved, is not the real emperor, because Hongwu, before dying, decided that it would be his grandson, Jiang Wen, who will be the next emperor. And of course, Zhu Di took over the power. So he decided, I'm the new emperor, but there's no legitimacy, real legitimacy. So he wants that, because it's important to gather his people around him. How can he do that? Well, at that time, there was a rule that when you got the power when you get emperor, you change your name. You would change your name. For example, Zudi, let's take the example Zudi. His birth name was Zudi. And as a new emperor, he had to change his name. That was the rule. And he decided for Young Lo. I don't know if you would call your baby Young Lo, but you don't decide. He's the emperor. And Young Lo means in Chinese eternal joy. I don't know if his opponents thought that it was real joy, because many of them were killed. But anyway, that's the name he chooses. And now he wants to take this opportunity of changing name ceremony to get legitimate. And he asked for the greatest scholar of that time, the greatest philosopher, the greatest thinker at that time, to write for him this proclamation of changing names, kind of, inaugural speech. And the name of this scholar is Feng Xiaoru. Feng Xiaoru. This is someone. Feng Xiaoru, very skilled, very smart, very intelligent, very honest. Honesty. He possesses a lot of ethics. And Feng Xiaoru was the tutor of Zhang Guan. He was his tutor. So he taught him all the values of life, etc. To see his, not a son, but almost like a son, his student, trusted student, die in a fire, supposedly, because of Zudi, you may think, of course, that Feng Xiaoru doesn't like Zudi too much. And here comes Zudi asking Feng Xiaoru to write him his inaugural address, his proclamation of changing names. Because if Feng Xiaoru writes this paper, this proclamation, Chinese people will trust Feng Xiaoru and think that, okay, Zudi can be the legitimate emperor. So, Feng Xiaoru receives this demand from Zudi. His answer?